The notion that she's inconsistent, though, um, I mean, that pales in comparison to what is the moving target or the cat chasing a red dot that is the Trump administration that wanted to ban TikTok, now likes it, was against his for economic policy, but now wants tariffs or economic growth. Seems to be, has appointed three justices who overturned what was supposed to be established precedents of Roe v. Wade, and then says that he's going to be great for women.
We're joined here in the studio by Sarah Elliott, spokesperson for Republicans overseas. Good evening, Sarah.
Good evening.
Great to have you with us. Scott Galloway joins us as well, marketing professor at New York University. He's a megastar in the US, co-host of the tech and politics podcast Pivot, and just general big brain. Good evening, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And Molly Ball, senior political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, also with us this evening. Good evening, Molly.
Hi, great to be here.
Let's start tonight then with events happening this evening. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump tonight speaking in that key swing state of Pennsylvania. It's seen as the biggest prize for both parties, each party, as it holds the highest number of electoral college votes. It comes as a new NBC News poll today claims that Trump has closed the gap on Kamala Harris and is now tied with her on 48 points. She was 5 points ahead a month ago. It depends which poll you look at, but the general concern, I suppose, is not necessarily that some of these polls may be neck and neck or slightly ahead for Trump or slightly ahead for Kamala Harris within the margin of error. It's that neither candidate is really jumping ahead with just 3 weeks to go. Scott Galloway, let's go to you first of all. Kamala Harris needs to make a bit of a dent in these polls. What do you think is the reason why they're so narrow? Do you think a lot of people have yet to make their mind up? Or do we need to see something big and bold from the Democrats?
It's sort of hard to imagine that there's undecided voters at this point, but I guess there are. You're right. It doesn't all come down to Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania is turning out to be the kind of the swingest of swing states. I think there was a lot of momentum after the debate in the Democratic National Convention for the Harris campaign, and it seems as if that momentum has been reversed the last couple of weeks. A couple of her appearances have not gone down well the last week, and despite all the mockery of a guy like Musk jumping on stage for him, he's had a very good 1 or 2 weeks. He seems very comfortable on these sort of manosphere podcasts. She is held to a higher standard. If she made some of the gaffes that he's made, she would be absolutely excoriated, but it doesn't matter what it's supposed to be. It just is. She was pretty weak on a couple of appearances this week, and it appears that the momentum has flipped back to Trump. But as you said, it's in the margin of error. It's sort of a coin flip. I think anyone who tells you it's decided one way or the other, because it's just not being truthful.
And that is what neither campaign wants. They don't want it to be on a coin toss. They want some sort of lead bedded in. Kamala Harris has now agreed to her first ever sit-down interview with Fox News, Molly Ball. First formal sit-down with the network. This will happen on Wednesday of this week. Why did it take her so long?
Well, I think Democrats are always a little bit reluctant to appear on Fox News specifically, but we've seen that for Harris, doing interviews generally has been something she's not particularly eager to do, and that may have contributed to this sort of stalling of momentum that Scott describes. This is, people are already voting in I believe all of the swing states now, or they're about to start voting. People are getting their ballots in the mail. People are starting to mail them in or come to vote early in person. And given that, in I think all of the swing states, there's about 47% of the vote that is firmly committed to one or the other candidate. Those last few percents are all going to be about the ground game and the turnout game and how these how the campaigns can get those last few percentage points of people off the couch and to the polls. And so you see Harris trying to meet people, trying to reach people in as many places as possible. We know that fewer and fewer people still watch linear television or cable news. So it's podcasts, it's different ways of trying to reach people. And, because she's a late entrant into this campaign, Harris is still trying to get people to feel like they know who she is and what she's going to do. And given that the current administration is quite unpopular, given that Many people blame Joe Biden for how unhappy they are about the state of the economy and the state of the border in particular. She's got to reach them with her message and convince them that she would offer something different. And that's a very challenging thing to do in this very polarized environment.
And it's tough when you come to things like immigration and the economy too. We'll move on to that. So the relevance of Pennsylvania, for those of our listeners who understand a little about swing states but want to know more about Pennsylvania, it's seen as so crucial because it's where Trump beat Hillary Clinton by more than 40,000 in 2016. Joe Biden, who's native to Pennsylvania, he edged Trump by 80,000 votes in the state 4 years ago. So you can see where the swing moniker comes from, can't you? Kamala Harris and Donald Trump both making appearances there. This is Harris's 10th visit to Pennsylvania this campaign. Donald Trump was there twice last week. I kind of know the answer to this, Sarah Elliott, and of course swing states are crucial, but I wonder whether there's ever a danger of there being too much emphasis. Are you ever in danger of leaving anyone behind if you're continually focusing on one or just a few states so much, or is that just the name of the game?
Well, it's true. And for Kamala Harris, she has to win what we call the blue wall, which is Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. All three of those states are crucial for her to win, especially where the trends are moving in the other swing states for Trump. And so if she spends all her time and energy in Pennsylvania, she's not hitting up the other two states. And there is an issue with Michigan because there's a large Muslim population there that are not keen on the democratic social policies and not keen on their stance on Israel and Gaza. And also her electrical vehicle mandates, her EV mandates. She has come out very much against fossil fuel energy, but then all of a sudden when running for president, she's for fracking. She's not as much into the EV cars and manufacturing as she once was when she was, a senator from California. So there's a lot of dueling policies here. She's kind of to voters flip-flopping on the issues. And of course, Michigan is the car capital of America.
Is that fair, Scott Galloway, that Kamala Harris has had to drop some of her California identity in order to make a pitch to the whole of America?
Well, I think it's fair that she's modulating, that she recognizes that in Midwestern states she needs to modulate. And, she's been much more amenable to fracking than she was. She's been much more resolute about the support of Israel. Biden and Harris, I would argue, no other world leaders have been more supportive of Israel. There was only one administration that immediately deployed 2 aircraft carrier strike forces to Israel after October 7th, and it was the Biden-Harris administration. The notion that she's inconsistent, though, that pales in comparison to what is the moving target or the cat chasing a red dot that is the Trump administration that wanted to ban TikTok, now likes it, was against his for economic policy, but now wants tariffs or economic growth, seems to be, has appointed 3 justices who overturned what was supposed to be established precedents of Roe v. Wade, and then says that he's going to be great for women. I don't.
And says he won't sign a national abortion ban. He's, swung the other way on that.
Yeah, I just don't. I think it's difficult to accuse her of inconsistency when she's running against someone that it's sort of what his blood sugar is dictates his position on issues that day.
Look, it doesn't put off a lot of Americans. The same number, if sort of polls are neck and neck, it doesn't put off a large proportion of Americans. Exactly the same proportion who will vote for Kamala Harris at the moment. So in other words, he may be inconsistent, he may be changing his mind over things, but it's certainly not, it doesn't seem to be having a negative effect on him. And when it comes to the economy, I think a lot of Americans, who I hear from regularly, feel that they just can't trust Kamala Harris on the economy. They don't particularly like Donald Trump. They don't particularly love all of his policies. But what they're about right now is a solid economy, Scott, and that is above everything. They're fed up of being broke, fed up of the price of things, and will take the hit of Donald Trump in order to feel more economically secure. That is the trade-off that they're prepared to make.
But there's perception and reality, and the reality is their perception is reality right now. If you look at the data, America has the lowest inflation rate of the entire G7 while having the strongest growth. But the reality is people blame the administration when gas and diapers go up in price, but when their salaries outpace inflation, which they are again, they credit their own character and grit. So distinct of what a lot of economists would call the Goldilocks economy, this is markets touching all-time highs, lowest inflation, strongest growth. Our economy has grown 8.5% since the Biden administration. The UK is flat, Germany's actually down, but consumers don't feel good about the economy, and that perception is her reality. And she's going to have to, I think, be more definitive about certain economic programs. I was surprised neither of them have addressed the deficit. But the reality is the U.S. economy, there are 190 countries in the world, 189 would pray for our problems. The economy in the U.S. right now is as strong, arguably, on a relative basis than it's ever been. But similar to that statement about the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. Prosperity really is in the U.S. One company is worth more Apple than the entire UK stock market. It's just not evenly distributed, and people hold the current administration accountable for that.
Let's talk about this third assassination attempt then of Donald Trump. Potentially a third assassination attempt. A man with guns and fake passes was stopped outside Trump's California rally on Saturday. I don't know whether to admire him for speaking up, Sarah Elliott, or say he is being a bit of a drama llama, because we now know that man deeply admires the former President Donald Trump. It doesn't mean that he wasn't out to kill him, but just everything that we've heard since has sort of dumbed down the assassination attempt. What was this? And in a really cynical, with my very cynical mind on, could this have been used by the Trump campaign to present him as a man under threat? When we met last time, we spoke to Jerry Baker of the Wall Street Journal, and he was talking about the fact that Iran's desperate to assassinate Donald Trump. Could this have been that, or is this? Could this be a campaign move, or will this be accused of being a campaign move, I think is the better way to put it.
Oh, I don't think it was a campaign move. I mean, this guy sounds like a Looney Tune. He doesn't sound stable. So I don't think the Trump campaign would risk doing a stunt like that. And I also think it's exceptionally dangerous to be walking around with such firearms in a group setting, and who knows what was going on in this man's head, and good thing that he got caught. But, these rallies, there's thousands of people there that, thank goodness, that deputy or whoever it was that looked at the passes and realized, oh, wow, this doesn't look right. When you go into a theater or you go to a big event and they just glance at your ticket, it's a very good thing that they caught that in that quick second that something wasn't right.
The guy, Vem Miller, who's the guy in question, told Fox News Digital that he had firearms due to death threats over his website, America Happens. I don't know anything about guns, he said. I am beyond a novice. I always travel around with firearms in the back of my truck. I've literally never even shot a gun in my life. So it kind of doesn't really make sense either, does it? Molly, the wider question of the safety of Donald Trump, have people been talking about this, that actually as a president he is much more of a target than Kamala Harris potentially?
Well, I don't know if we can say that for a fact. The reason we have a Secret Service is that political figures need to be protected from a lot of threats. And in this case, as Sarah said, this appears to be, the isolated case of someone who was potentially somewhat out of touch with reality. And although, he's now given several interviews where he says that his intention was not to use these firearms or to commit any violence against Donald Trump, there, of course, were assassination attempts earlier that we know about. Who knows what else there may be that we don't. But this is something that, the Trump campaign, again, to talk about the cynical campaign maneuvering behind it, obviously Trump has not asked for or had a hand in any of these threats occurring, but the campaign does hope to remind people of the idea that he's being targeted as part of his argument that he represents a threat to the system, right? So much of the argument around Donald Trump's campaign, whether he's talking about his many criminal indictments and the one conviction, or the way his opponents talk about him, or indeed the assassination attempts, is making the case that because he represents change, because he represents draining the swamp and changing the way that the establishment has done business for so long, that makes him a threat that the establishment then has to somehow take out. So we saw, recently he returned to Butler, Pennsylvania, the site of that terrifying shooting incident back in July that was nearly successful, and held a big rally there. That was the one that Elon Musk attended. And the idea is that, this is an appealing image of him to a lot of his supporters. The idea that he's a fighter, the idea that he is brave and unbowed in the face of these sorts of threats. And so it's certainly an image that his campaign wants to remind people of. And it is certainly something that, at least among his supporters, you see a lot of them, waving flags or wearing T-shirts with that image of him with his fist up after that first assassination attempt, because they believe it's a way of reminding people of an image of him that they think is appealing.
Let's round things off with the new film about Donald Trump. It's called The Apprentice. It comes out here in the UK on Friday. Have you seen this, Scott Galloway?
I haven't, but I don't need to see it. I know what's in there. He's a guy who inherited a lot of money from his father, has not paid his vendors, has had a very kind of storied but tumultuous, bumpy, professional career. We've all seen it. We know what it's going to say.